Hey everyone, I'm Marissa Evangelista, a gallery assistant at MFA. I'm here to introduce Jayne Gaskins, and we have the honor of learning more about her piece, Subway Musician, which is in our Fiber Options exhibition here at Circle Gallery. Jayne states that her art goes beyond what she thinks about a subject, and her work exposes how she feels about it. Fiber is her medium of choice because of its tactile qualities and how it can be molded to reflect emotions. I'd also like to briefly introduce our host, Will Scott, an art historian who bridges the gap between artists and the public. And thank you so much, the both of you, for being here today.
Well, thank you, Marissa, for your continual outstanding support of the Will Talks. And Jayne, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed to talk with me today. And I have to say, in all honesty, for me, this is one of the interviews that I've looked forward to more than almost any of the others that I've done. And I'll tell you why, and then we'll get to the first image. Because your background as an artist is in textiles and quilt making. My mother and her sisters and aunts and her mother, my grandmother, I often observed them on the family farm in the wilds of southeastern Georgia, gathered around a quilt frame, making the traditional patchwork quilts and a few others. And I was always fascinated by it. And it turns out that Jayne was working in photography before she got interested in quilting. Am I correct, Jayne?
No, well, actually, my undergrad degree was in graphic design, and I used photography a great deal with my work. But
Yeah.
no, I wasn't a photographer. I used photography a great deal with my work.
Okay. Well, then I'm not completely over the hill yet. I knew you had mentioned photography, and my artwork is in photography. And so I thought these are kind of bringing together two things that I am very interested in myself. And the image that, Jayne, that you have in our current textile art exhibit is one that, for me as a photographer,
Mhm.
pulled up a lot of very powerful associations. And more importantly, I think it's a very compelling image. So let's look at that first image and begin to, Jayne, ask you to tell us a little bit more about uh, how it was made and what its significance is to you as an artist and as an individual human being.
Okay, well, I guess the history on this. First of all, I take my iPhone with me, and the camera on the iPhone is pretty good. And if something catches my eye or something and speaks to me, I photograph it. And if I can't stop thinking about it, I figure it's calling out to me to be a part of my art. And this one really struck me because this actually there were four photographs merged in here, but this guy was playing a guitar in a DC station. And if you know anything about the DC Metro, you cannot have performance arts there. And he didn't know that. And I got there just about the time, just before the DC police got there to tell him very nicely that he was going to have to leave. They were very professional, very with everything. He was very professional, apologized, packed everything up. Nobody got tased or put in a chokehold. Everything was all very professional. And my train got there and I left. And I thought, gee, I wish we did have this because in New York, they have to audition for that.
Yeah. Hmm.
And they pay to be down there, but whatever. Anyway, I just kept thinking about him and how he was just so engrossed in his music. And he was like, he really didn't care what was going on around him. He was really lost in his music there. And I just found that beautiful. So what I did was I pulled this up in Photoshop, and Photoshop is my friend. All of my work starts with a photograph, at least one photograph, and then I put it into Photoshop and I start manipulating. I just start playing with it. And I thought, okay, we need to pull in some people in the background. And so I pulled those in from other shots that I've taken, God only knows where. and the train. I think his boombox was on the other side. So for balance, I put it on the left side because it worked better. And I just kept playing with it and just let it percolate for a while. And then the next phase is I do a sort of a tissue transfer. I print it out, actual size, and do a tissue transfer and use that sort of as a guide, and then just pull out all kinds of fabric and collage them.
Okay, may I interrupt just right here for two questions? One, I'm not sure quite what I mean, what you mean by a tissue transfer. I think I know, but if you would just briefly explain that.
Sure. I put a piece of tracing paper, tracing tissue over it, and use that as kind of a guide to cut the different pieces by.
Okay, so you don't cut the tissue paper, you cut the pieces of fabric that you want to sort of lay over it.
Right, that I want to lay over that. And I have what is technically a quilt sandwich, which is batting and fabric on both sides. What I like about that is that I can, when I get ready to stitch, there are just valleys and things. In fact, you can see in the detail of it there behind his head that I was able to just draw those lines in there. You get very subtle lines, and you get textures in there that you can't get with anything else. And particularly with this one, in fact, with the whole series I'm working on, I'm doing more and more that are, I guess, multi-edged. As I was working, I thought, why does this have to be rectangular? There was a lot of movement there. I want to pick up that movement. I want to pick up that he's stationary with his music, but there's movement all around him, and he's completely oblivious to it.
I want to interrupt here because I think we're at a kind of a crucial point in helping me and me as the representative of the viewers of this program, knowing something about quilting, and having talked with you and learned a little bit more about contemporary textile arts in general. Quilting has strong association even today, even among the most serious contemporary quilters, of being a high form of craft, and some people unjustly deem anything that's a quilt as not serious art. You're describing to me the very process that most two-dimensional artists or visual artists would go through in creating the final work. How do you feel about this disrespect, for lack of a better word, for quilting?
Thank you. I like the word disrespect. Well, first of all, I have never made a traditional quilt. I really just sort of stumbled into this, but I have a great deal of respect for women who did, because it was utilitarian, it was needed, and many of the things they produced and still producing today, these bedspreads are gorgeous. But even they themselves did not consider themselves artists. And the fiber art movement actually emerged about a little over 50 years ago. So it's been around for a while. And it's really had a lot of parallel to the civil rights movement and to women's rights movement.
Yeah.
And I look at early pioneers like Faith Ringgold and Dawn Williams Boyd, people like that, and very courageous, that they were making a statement. And they weren't doing pretty flowers to hang over the fireplace. They were making a statement, and those were strong statements that needed to be made. And
well, and I also, if I may say, I've always understood their conscious making of a statement to not be just that they're making art and they're making art with social content, but they're also making it with a medium that is traditional to their African American, perhaps Gullah culture. So it's really a serious statement.
Very much so. And more women began seeing this and saying, wait a minute, I can communicate. And if you stop and think that all arts, not just the visual, but all in music, theater, everything is a form of communication. and they wanted to say, I have something to say too. And we all notice that you go into a gallery with it and they say, oh, honey, take your needlework and go back to the steno pool and get me a cup of coffee while you're at it. So that's why more people like me do not use the Q word.
Yeah.
Because if you go in and call it a quilt, they say we don't do craft. But if you go in and you call it mixed media, they go, ooh, yeah. But if you call it collage, they say, well, we do collage.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of semantics.
Well, let me call your attention to, and the viewers' attention really, to a couple of things about this image, and then I'm going to I can't resist doing my little art historian shtick that I just can't seem to completely quash it down. What I want to ask you is in the close-up of the man's face, not only can you see distinctly the collage elements as you've utilized them, but there is such a sophisticated use of light and shadow. Would you say a little bit more about how you create those effects around the head and the nose and the cheekbone? Because in the image, I cannot tell whether they are applied color or they are literally different small pieces of fabric that have been stitched together.
I have quite a stash of fabric. And I mean, I'll pick it up anywhere. I mean, a traditional quilter is very particular about, the 100% cotton. Shoot, I'll go through Goodwill. I can find some things for about $1 in there that is really good quality and some great colors.
Mhm.
If I get really desperate, I'll go through my own closet.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, it's whatever color works. And so it takes a while of putting these together. But this is all the whole color, the whole color palette, the composition, everything has already been worked out by the time it gets there.
But
And
each different color
oh yeah,
is a separate piece of fabric.
absolutely. Every one
Um,
is a different
mm.
piece of fabric.
Well, it's extraordinarily to me impressive as the manual dexterity, but that manual dexterity is clearly from the way you've explained your working process and thinking process at the service of the same kind of aesthetic thinking that most artists would utilize. You just have chosen a more unique medium in which to do that.
Yeah, it is. I sort of stumbled into, because like I said, my undergrad major was graphic design, and I was an art director with advertising agencies. And then I went back to school and got an MBA and left the creative world for quite some time. But when I retired, I thought, okay, I got to do something creative. And I thought I had the best time when my boys were young making Halloween costumes.
Huh.
And I mean, if you let the kid decide, hey, I want to be a headless horseman
Yeah,
or a hurricane, you think, okay, that's a challenge. I'm up for
good.
it. And I thought that I really, really enjoyed that. I thought, well, what else can I do with cloth? What else can I do with fiber? And just started playing with it. And it's basically taken me. And I really don't have goals or objectives as I always did before. I'm just letting life take me.
Well, our conversation over the phone a few days ago suggested that you do have a sense of direction at this particular moment.
I do.
And I want to get to that, but we are very conscious about being timely in these short will talks so that we can edit them, get them out to our public, and get people in to see your work before the show closes. So my little art history shtick, which will be briefer than usual today because of the time and the fascinating nature of your work. Did you study art history at all? There
Yeah.
are art
Yeah.
historical precedents for this image that are, to me, very powerful and very significant. But I want to know if you were thinking of that, aware of that in your creative process.
No, I wasn't thinking of it. Yes, I did study art history. I have a BFA, so we certainly did do a great deal of art history. But I don't think I was so much as I was really trying to capture the emotion.
Yes. Well, the two precedents that I think are most germane to what you're doing are the photographer Walker Evans, who did a famous series in the 1930s called the Subway Series, where
Yeah,
he sat on a subway, New York City subway train repeatedly with a little tiny, at its time, extremely compact camera, and he could just take a picture by opening his winter coat just enough to expose the lens. And what he was after was this kind of person absorbed in their own thoughts, their own activities, not aware that they were posing or being photographed. And the other thing, the other artist is Robert Frank, who I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but one of his most famous early works, one that put him on the map as a serious photographer, was a number of photographs that he took while he had a Fulbright scholarship traveling around the United States, and he took them of the trolleys in New Orleans. And if you've not seen them,
well, I'm not.
please, both of you, anybody listening, look them up
Definitely.
because they're very powerful. But this you have, Jayne, done in this unusual material for something so serious and so with such a depth of feeling, which I think makes your accomplishment all the more. I'm an art historian, so if I can connect it to a great figure in the history of art, then I'm even more impressed by the artists that I'm speaking with. And now, really, just because of the time, Marissa, if you would just step slowly through the other images to get to the last one that we have to look at. Jayne, I had said to you a moment ago that you really did, I think, or at least you shared with me some sense of direction for what you're going to be doing in the near future. And I think this is the image that um, really, I hope you can say a little bit about and about that future direction, because I think it sounds like a fascinating project.
Well, this is one that I shot in San Jose, and I was really, really surprised at the number of homeless there. And I thought, well, I guess if I'm going to be homeless, I'd rather be homeless in San Jose than in Toronto. But still, it was really tragic. It really, really pulled at me. And I saw this guy, and again, shot it. I just wanted to show sort of the desperation, the people living on the street. And I will say this about this guy and also the other one. I don't have model releases, so I went back and changed their appearances. So it's does not look like the original person.
Yeah.
So I want to get sued. But yeah, this is part of a series I'm doing that I call Heartbeat of the City. And if my premise is if you accept that people are the lifeblood of a city, then the streets, the subways, the sidewalks, the taxis, all of those,
Mhm. Yes.
those are the veins and the arteries that carry them through. And how fast they go picks up each city's unique heartbeat. And I have an awful lot of I guess perspectives, um, diagonals, perspectives, because I'm trying to pick up movement. And it might be fast, it might be slow, but I'm trying to pick up movement there with that.
Well, this is a contemplative message image to my eyes until I hear you speak about what you're trying to accomplish in the individual work and the series that you're in the midst of creating. So, do you plan to sort of work through a series of ideas and themes that you'll then bring together in a solo exhibit or potentially a book? Or, I mean, is that your goal?
That is, in fact, I'm already scheduled for two solos, one at the Torpedo Factory at the end of 25, and the other I exhibit my work in New York in a New York gallery in 26, and it will be all on the heartbeat of the city. And
That sounds so exciting, and I hope that you'll include me on the guest list, at least for the torpedo. I exhibit at the Art League fairly often, and just have something up at the Athenaeum also right now. So that's right in my home area, and I would love to see what you produce. But given the time that we have, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your work with us. I think you're doing something here that is very high level, serious art in a form that many of us regrettably don't realize has so much potential and so much authority as art. So again, I hope everybody who hears this will rush off to the gallery, the Circle Gallery on State Circle, and see your work before the show closes, and look for more of your work, which I hope you'll submit to our exhibitions.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been fun.
Great. Same thing right back at you. It was great chatting with you and getting to know you and your work a little bit. Thank you.